Deciding to surprise her husband, I bought coffee and drove to his office. But as soon as I entered the reception area, his secretary ran in, turned pale, and grabbed my arm. "Quick, in the closet," she whispered, shutting the door. I didn't have time to ask anything, and a minute later, my husband walked in, and I heard something that made my blood run cold. Welcome to the Crossroads of Fate channel. Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from. We're very curious. We wish you pleasant listening to this fascinating story. Helen awoke that morning with a sense of lightheartedness she hadn't felt in a long time. A fine drizzle was falling outside, thin streams of water trickling down the glass. But inside the apartment, it was warm and cozy. She turned on her side, glanced at the empty half of the bed, and smiled. Mark had left for work before dawn, as usual. He had always been a workaholic, especially in recent years. Meetings, conferences, business trips, it had all become a part of their lives. Helen had long ago resigned herself to this rhythm, though she sometimes missed simple human warmth, a normal conversation over a cup of tea. She got up, threw on a robe, and went to the kitchen. She turned on the electric kettle and took her favorite mug with a daisy pattern from the cabinet. While the water boiled, Helen walked to the window and looked out at the gray courtyard, at the swings swaying rhythmically in the wind. She suddenly remembered how she and Mark used to walk here many years ago, when they first moved into this condo. He had held her by the shoulders then, telling her they would be happy, that he would do everything to give them the very best. Back then, she believed his every word, looked up to him, and rejoiced at having such a dependable, strong husband. The kettle clicked off, and Helen returned to the counter. She poured the hot water, dipped a tea bag in, and stirred it thoughtfully with a spoon. Lately, she had been catching herself thinking that she and her husband had become like strangers under the same roof. He left in the morning and returned in the evening, exhausted, eating dinner in silence before retreating to his home office. There was almost no conversation. She would try to ask how his day was, how work was going, but would only get curt replies. "Fine, everything's good, tired." Sometimes she would go into his office, sit on the edge of the sofa, and try to start a conversation about something important. He would nod, staring at his monitor, and give a non-committal answer. Helen would leave, feeling like an intruder in her own home. She finished her tea and looked at the clock. 10 a.m. It was her day off. She could just relax, watch a series, do some chores, tidy up the closets, maybe finally go through those boxes in the attic storage that had been sitting there for 5 years. But a sudden stubbornness, a desire to change the situation, awoke within her. Why not do something nice? Why not remind her husband that she loved him, that she was there for him? Maybe he was just lacking attention, care. Maybe he was tired, burned out from work, and she just needed to be closer, to support him. Helen quickly got dressed, choosing a light blouse and dark slacks from her closet, applied some lipstick, and glanced at herself in the mirror. 50 years old, but still looking pretty good, she thought. Gray strands at her temples, crow's feet around her eyes, but her gaze was lively, kind. Mark always used to say she had beautiful eyes, though the last time he'd said that was so long ago that Helen couldn't even remember when. She grabbed her purse, car keys, and left the apartment. Walking down the stairs, she was already planning her route. First, she'd stop by that coffee shop on the corner that Mark loved so much. They made an amazing cappuccino with cinnamon there. He always ordered that specific drink. They used to go there often, back when they still found time for each other. Then, she'd drive to his office. It would be a surprise. He'd be surprised, of course, but it would be a pleasant surprise, right? Maybe they could even have lunch together. They hadn't done that in a long time. Helen got into her old sedan and started the engine. The rain had intensified. The wipers squeaked rhythmically across the windshield. She pulled out of the parking lot and drove through the familiar streets. Along the way, she thought about what groceries to buy for dinner. Maybe she should cook something special tonight. Mark loved her roasted chicken with potatoes. Or maybe she could try something new, find a recipe online. The coffee shop greeted her with the aroma of freshly ground beans and quiet jazz music. A young woman in an apron with the shop's logo smiled from behind the counter. "Good morning. What can I get for you?" 2 cappuccinos with cinnamon, please. And could I get them in to-go cups? Of course, coming right up. It'll be about 5 minutes. Helen waited, looking out the window at the rainy street. People hurried by under umbrellas. Cars passed, splashing puddles onto the sidewalk. An elderly woman with a small dog stopped at the window of the neighboring shop, looking at something. A young couple ran past, laughing and huddling under a single umbrella. Helen remembered how she and Mark used to come here on weekends, sitting by the window, talking about everything under the sun. He would tell her about work, share his plans, dream about their vacations, about buying a lake house where they'd spend their summers. When did that end? When did they stop simply being together? Your order is ready. The young woman handed her 2 cups in cardboard holders. That'll be $9.50. Thank you so much. Helen paid and took the coffees. She stepped outside, turning her face to the rain for a second, then quickly got into her car. She placed the cups in the holder between the seats, started the engine, and headed towards the downtown business district where her husband's office was located. The drive took about 20 minutes. She drove carefully, unhurriedly, glancing at the GPS. The area was familiar. She had been here a couple of times, dropping off forgotten documents for Mark or picking him up after work on the rare days his car was in the shop. The business center was a tall, modern glass building with mirrored windows reflecting the gray sky. Helen parked nearby, got out of the car, and took the cups. The rain had subsided a little, turning into a fine mist. She walked to the entrance and pushed through the heavy revolving door. The lobby met her with the coolness of air conditioning, a marble floor, and high ceilings. It smelled of something expensive, corporate. A man in a security guard's uniform sat at the front desk. He looked up as Helen approached. Good morning. Who are you here to see? Mark Peterson, 7th floor. Helen smiled. I'm his wife. The guard nodded without asking for ID and waved her towards the elevators. Go on up. She thanked him and headed to the elevator. Inside, a floor-to-ceiling mirror reflected her image. A slightly anxious face, hair damp from the rain. She smoothed it with her hand and exhaled. Everything would be fine. It was just a surprise. Mark would be happy. The elevator rose silently to the 7th floor. The doors opened. The hallway was quiet, empty. The walls were beige, adorned with abstract paintings in frames. A soft carpet underfoot muffled the sound of her steps. Helen walked past several doors with nameplates, indicating names and positions. Lawyers, accountants, managers. Finally, she saw the right nameplate. M. Peterson, Director of Business Development. Her heart beat faster than usual. This is silly, she thought. It's just a surprise for my husband. What's there to be nervous about? She pushed the door open and entered the reception area. The room was small and cozy. A desk stood by the window, and behind it sat the secretary, Brenda, a woman in her 40s, with a neat hairstyle pulled back into a severe bun and a dark blue pantsuit. Helen had seen her a couple of times when she'd stopped by for Mark. Brenda was always polite but a bit distant, professional. Diplomas and certificates hung on the walls, and file folders stood on a shelf. Good morning, Brenda, Helen smiled, holding up the cups. I decided to bring Mark some coffee. A little surprise. Brenda looked up from her computer, and Helen saw the secretary's face change in an instant. The color drained from her cheeks as if wiped away by a sponge. Her eyes widened, her lips trembled and parted. Brenda shot up from her desk so abruptly that her chair rolled back and hit a cabinet. She nearly knocked over a half-finished cup of tea sitting next to her keyboard, her hand darting out to catch it at the last second. Mrs. Peterson. Her voice was hoarse, strained, nothing like her usual tone. Well, it's a surprise. Helen was a little taken aback by her reaction. She tried to smile wider, but something in Brenda's eyes made the smile freeze. Is something wrong? Is Mark here? Brenda rushed towards her from around the desk. Her movements were sharp, almost panicked. She grabbed Helen's elbow. Her fingers were cold, strong, squeezing tightly, almost painfully. Helen nearly dropped the coffee cups. Quick, in the closet, Brenda whispered, glancing at the door to Mark's office as if expecting someone to come out. Quickly, please, I'm begging you. What? Brenda, What are you talking about? Helen tried to pull away, but the secretary held on tight. Please, don't ask questions right now. Just do it. Brenda was already dragging her towards a large built-in closet against the far wall of the reception area. She pulled the door open with a sharp tug. Inside hung some jackets, coats, a change of clothes. It smelled of wood, dust, and the faint scent of men's cologne. Please, get inside. It's very important right now. Brenda's voice was trembling. Helen looked into the secretary's eyes and saw real fear. Not an act, not a game, not theatrics. Real, genuine terror. Her face was pale. Beads of sweat had formed on her forehead. Her hands were shaking. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. Brenda, what's happening? Tell me. I'll explain later. I beg you. There's no time now. Brenda practically pushed her into the closet, and Helen, no longer resisting, stepped inside. She barely managed to hold on to the coffee cups, which nearly slipped from her hands. Stay quiet, no matter what happens. Not a sound. The door closed with a soft click, and Helen was plunged into darkness. Her heart was pounding so loudly it felt like it could be heard outside. She stood between the hanging clothes, clutching the now cooling coffee cups to her chest. Coats and jackets brushed against her shoulders, her face. It was stuffy, cramped. A thin sliver of light from the reception area seeped through the narrow gap between the doors. What was that? Why was Brenda so scared? And why on earth had she listened and climbed into this closet like a schoolgirl playing hide and seek? It was absurd, foolish, but the fear in the secretary's eyes had been real. Helen couldn't help but believe it. She tried to breathe evenly, listening. Muffled sounds came from beyond the closet door. The click of Brenda's heels on the floor, the rustle of papers, the click of the main office door's lock. The reception door opened, and footsteps entered a man's, heavy, confident, "Good morning, Mark." Brenda's voice was strained, falsely cheerful, as if she were playing a role and doing it poorly. "You have a conference call with the partners in half an hour. Should I remind you beforehand?" "I know, Bren," her husband's voice replied. Helen recognized it immediately, but there was something different about it. It sounded light, almost cheerful, relaxed. He hadn't spoken to her like that in a long time, maybe ever. "Get Steve on the line for me now. I want to clarify a few details about the transfer. I don't want to discuss this in front of everyone." "Okay, I'll connect you now." The footsteps moved away. The door to Mark's office closed with a soft thud. Silence. Helen stood in the dark, clutching the cups, not understanding what was happening. Why hide from her own husband? What the hell was Brenda doing? Maybe Mark had some important meeting? Maybe he didn't want to be disturbed? But then why the look of terror in the secretary's eyes? And then she heard Mark's voice, loud, clear, coming directly from his office through the thin wall. He had put the call on speaker. "Yeah, Steve. Hey, how's it going? How's life?" An unfamiliar male voice answered with a cheerful laugh. The voice was a bit rough, casual. "Doing all right, old man. Everything's good. Listen, you promised to help with the money transfer for Jessica. When can you get it done? She's called me 3 times already. Says she needs it urgently." Mark laughed. Helen stood motionless, hanging on every word. What money? Who was Jessica? Why was Steve helping transfer money to some woman? "I'll get it to her this week, same as always, Steve. Don't worry." Her husband spoke casually, as if discussing buying groceries. "I explained it to you. It's easier through your account, leaves less of a trail. Jessica and the kid need money. Mikey needs gear for his sports team or something. Kids? They always need something. You know how it is." Helen felt the blood drain from her face. Jessica, the kid, Mikey. Mark was transferring money through Steve to some woman and a child. "Yeah, kids are expensive. I know that myself," Steve replied, "but you're a genius for setting it all up like this. Transferring through me. No direct trace. I respect that, honestly. How's your official wife, Helen? Does she suspect anything?" Her fingers, trembling and damp with sweat, slid toward her pants pocket. Her phone. Slowly, trying not to make a sound, not to brush against the hangers, she took it out. She turned on the screen, the light stinging her eyes, and she squinted. She found the voice recorder app and pressed the red button. Let there be proof. Let him be unable to lie later, to make excuses, to turn everything upside down and convince her she misunderstood, that she was imagining things, that she was paranoid. Helen felt the blood drain from her face. Her fingers squeezed the cups harder, the plastic lids creaking. Wife, kid, Jessica, Mikey, what did it mean? What other wife? What other child? Mark laughed again. And in that laugh, there was not a shred of shame, not an ounce of remorse. It sounded light, pleased, like a man who had just pulled off a good deal. Are you kidding? She's convenient, Steve. Never asks questions, works 2 jobs, slaves away like crazy, pays off all the loans I took out. She thinks it's for our condo, for renovations, for our future. And meanwhile, I'm supporting my second family. I've been living like this for 5 years, and it works like clockwork. Helen clamped a hand over her mouth to keep from screaming. The coffee cups trembled in her other hand. The hot liquid sloshed inside. She was afraid they would fall, that she would give herself away with the noise. 5 years. For 5 years, he had been lying to her. For 5 years, he had another wife, another child, another family, while she worked herself to exhaustion, scrimped and saved, gave her last penny for those damn loans that she thought they were taking out together for their future, for their life. Man, you're a sly one, Mark, Steve said with admiration, a note of respect in his voice. I couldn't do it, honestly. Wouldn't have the nerves for it. What if she finds out? What will you do then? She won't find out, Mark answered confidently. There wasn't a hint of doubt in his voice. She trusts me. Completely, blindly trusts me. You see? She's foolish, naive, thinks I love her, that we're a family, but I'm just using her. Soon I'll squeeze the last of it out of her, transfer the condo to Jessica. It's all set up. A lawyer I know will help. We'll backdate the documents. And I'll tell Helen that we need to separate, that the feelings are gone, that we're different people, all that civilized divorce stuff. She'll cry a bit, of course, whine for a while, but then she'll get used to it. She'll find some old fool who wants a warm place in his old age. And I'll live with Jessica and Mikey peacefully, without that old hag hanging around my neck. Helen stood in the darkness as her world crumbled around her. Each word hit harder than a punch to the gut. This was her husband speaking, the man she had loved for 25 years, the man for whom she had given up her dreams, worked to exhaustion, endured his coldness and distance, justifying his perpetual busyness and fatigue. All right, Mark, I gotta go. Work's waiting. Steve was ending the call, his voice turning businesslike. Hang in there, man. Send the cash, feed your second family, and say hi to Jessica for me. Tell her I'm happy for you guys. Will do. Thanks, buddy. Talk soon. Bye. Bye. The call ended with a short beep. Helen heard Mark get up from his desk and walk around the office. His steps were light. He was even humming something to himself, some tune. The phone continued to record. The time counter ticked slowly on the screen. She stood leaning her back against the closet wall, her face buried in someone's coat, and tears streamed down her cheeks silently, hot, searing. But they weren't tears of self-pity. This was rage. Cold, burning, all-consuming rage. Mark continued to walk around the office. She heard his footsteps, the creak of his leather chair, the sound of a desk drawer opening. He was looking for something, rustling papers. Helen stood motionless, afraid to move, afraid to betray her presence with the slightest sound. The phone in her hand continued to record. A small red dot blinked on the screen. The coffee cups were completely cold now. She still held them, pressed against her chest, as if they were the only thing she could hold on to in this shattered world. The office door opened. Mark came out into the reception area. Bren, print out that contract for me, please, and bring me a coffee. I've got a headache. Right away, Mark. Brenda's voice was strained. She was clearly trying to remain calm. The footsteps retreated back into the office. The door closed. Helen heard Brenda's quick, quiet steps approaching the closet. The door creaked open a few inches. The secretary's pale face peered into the gap. Mrs. Peterson, she whispered. Did you hear? Helen nodded, unable to speak. Her throat was tight with tears, with rage, with pain. "I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell you sooner, but I didn't know how. I was afraid you wouldn't believe me, that he would twist everything around. Forgive me. How long have you known?" Helen's voice was hoarse, alien, almost from the beginning. 3 years, for sure. He would sometimes talk on the phone in front of me, not really hiding it. He probably thought of a secretary as furniture. Someone who doesn't count. I tried to hint at it a few times when you came by, but I couldn't bring myself to say it directly. "Close it," Helen asked. "I need a little more time." Brenda nodded and closed the door. Helen remained in the darkness. She stopped the recording, saved the file, and sent it to her email, then to her cloud storage. Just in case, her hands moved automatically. Her mind worked coldly, clearly, as if she were not herself, but someone else. A few minutes later, Brenda entered Mark's office. Helen heard her voice. "Here's the contract and your coffee. Thanks. Listen, has my wife called by any chance? She usually calls in the morning, but it's been quiet today." "No, she hasn't called," Brenda lied. "All right, maybe she's busy with something." The door closed again. Helen stood in the closet and thought coldly, calculatingly. How was she supposed to live now? How could anyone live after something like this? 25 years of marriage. For 25 years, she had believed him, trusted him, loved him, worked herself to the bone so they could live comfortably, so they could pay off their loans. And he had just used her, like a cash cow, an instrument to achieve his goals. For 5 years, he had another family, another woman, a child, Mikey, a boy he was raising, spending her money on. Money she earned by slaving away at 2 jobs. She worked as a nurse at the hospital from morning till afternoon, then drove to a private clinic where she was on duty until the evening. She would come home exhausted, with no energy left, and he would say they had common goals, that they had to be patient, that things would get easier soon. And all the while, he was supporting a second family. The condo. He was planning to sign the condo over to this Jessica. The condo they had bought together, where she lived, which she considered her home. All this time, he had been planning to leave her with nothing, to squeeze her dry and throw her away like a used rag. Helen felt rage spread through her body like a fever. Her hands clenched into fists. No, that wasn't going to happen. He would not get what he wanted. She would not let him throw her out like trash. She would not cry and feel sorry for herself. She would act. Another 20 minutes passed. Helen heard Mark on the phone with partners, discussing some contract details. His voice was calm, businesslike, confident, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just been discussing how he was deceiving his wife and planning to leave her with nothing. Finally, the conversation ended. Mark came out of his office. "I'm heading to lunch," he tossed to Brenda. "I'll be back in an hour." "Okay." The reception door opened and closed. His footsteps faded down the hallway. Silence. Helen slowly exhaled. Brenda came to the closet and opened the door. "He's gone," she said quietly. Helen stepped out of the closet and placed the long cold coffee cups on the desk. Her legs were stiff, her back ached. She rolled her shoulders, ran her palms over her face. Her eyes were dry, the tears were gone. All that remained was cold determination. "Thank you," she said to Brenda, looking her in the eyes. "Thank you for hiding me. If it weren't for you, I would have never known the truth." "I'm truly so sorry," Brenda said, her gaze guilty. "I should have said something sooner. You did what you could. I don't blame you. He's the one to blame. Only him." Helen took out her phone, showed her the recording. "I have proof. It's all recorded. Every word." Brenda nodded. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, exactly. But I won't let him kick me out of my own life." Helen turned towards her husband's office door. She knew where he kept his documents. She knew the combination to the safe. He never changed it. He thought she had no reason to go in there. The safe was in the corner behind his chair, disguised as a regular filing cabinet. "May I go in?" she asked Brenda. "Of course, but he might come back early." "I'll be quick." Helen entered her husband's office. The room was spacious, with a large window overlooking the city. A massive dark wood desk, a leather chair, shelves with folders and books, a diploma hung on the wall, a photo from some corporate event. On the desk was a frame with their picture together. Helen picked it up and looked at it. The photo was taken about 10 years ago. They were standing, arms around each other, smiling. She remembered that day. They had gone to the coast, on vacation, and they were happy. Or so she thought. Helen put the frame back, went to the safe, and entered the code. 2007. The year of their wedding. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside were folders with documents, some contracts, bank statements. Helen quickly sifted through the papers, looking for something important. The deed to the condo. There it was, the title, in both their names. She took it and put it in her purse. She took the marriage certificate too, a loan agreement, another one, and another. Helen scanned the amounts, the dates. Most of the loans were in Mark's name, but she was the co-signer. That meant the responsibility was on her too. In the back corner of the safe lay a notebook. Helen opened it. Notes, memos, phone numbers, and a name. Jessica Monroe. An address, a phone number. Helen took a picture of the page with her phone. It might come in handy. She closed the safe, looked around the office. Everything looked the same as it had. Mark wouldn't notice she had been there. Not yet. Helen left the office, nodding to Brenda. I'm leaving. Thanks again. Mrs. Peterson, the secretary stopped her. If you need a witness or a testimony, I'm ready to confirm everything. I sometimes recorded his conversations when he was being particularly candid. I have some things too. Helen looked at her in surprise. Why did you do that? Because it's wrong. Because you're a good person, and he's treating you like a thing. I couldn't just stay silent and watch. Thank you. Helen gave Brenda a short, firm hug. You're very brave. She left the office, took the elevator down, and went outside. The rain had stopped. The sky was starting to clear, the sun peeking through in places. Helen got in her car, placed her purse with the documents on the passenger seat, started the engine, but didn't drive right away. She just sat, staring through the windshield, gathering her thoughts. What now? Where to go? She didn't want to go home. She didn't want to see him, to talk to him, to pretend that nothing had happened. She needed a plan, a clear, well-thought-out plan of action. Helen took out her phone and dialed the number of her friend, Sarah. They had been friends since high school. Sarah worked as an accountant, a practical, smart woman who always gave good advice. Hello, Helen, Sarah answered. Hey, how are you? Sarah, I need your help. Helen's voice trembled. Can I come over? Right now? Of course. Come on over. What happened? I'll tell you when I get there. It's important. Helen tossed the phone onto the seat, pulled out of the parking spot. She drove mechanically, not thinking about the road. Thoughts swirled in her head, overlapping. 5 years of deceit. For 5 years, he had lived a double life. How did he manage it? How did he divide his time between two families? Business trips. Of course, he often went on business trips for 3 or 4 days, sometimes for a week. He said it was work, meetings, negotiations, but he was actually going to her, to this Jessica, to his son Mikey. Helen remembered how he would return from these trips. Tired, silent, heading straight for the shower, then sitting down to work at his computer. He never shared details of where he'd been, what he'd done. He'd brush it off, saying it was nothing interesting, just routine, boring stuff. She had believed him. Foolish, naive, trusting. Money. How much money had he been sending to this second family? Helen tried to remember how much they paid on the loans each month. At least $3,000, if not more, and that was just the loans. Plus, utilities, groceries, clothes. She worked herself to the bone to make ends meet. And Mark claimed his salary wasn't that high, that they needed to save, that times were tough. And she saved, cutting back on herself, wearing old clothes, forgoing entertainment, postponing doctor's visits because every penny counted. And meanwhile, he was supporting a second family, paying for his child's sports teams, buying him gear, toys, probably, living with another woman who perhaps didn't even work, who stayed at home raising his son, on her money. On the money that Helen earned with her labor, with her health. The car stopped at a red light. Helen looked in the rearview mirror and saw her face. Pale, with red-rimmed eyes, tear-streaked. She wiped her cheeks with her hand, trying to pull herself together. She couldn't fall apart now. She couldn't show weakness. She had to be strong. She had to survive this and emerge a winner, not a victim. The light turned green. Helen drove on. 20 minutes later, she pulled up to Sarah's building, parked, went up to the third floor, and rang the bell. Sarah opened the door immediately, apparently having been waiting by the window. Seeing her friend's face, she knew something serious had happened. "Oh my God, Helen, what's wrong? Get in here." They went into the kitchen. Sarah sat Helen down at the table and placed a cup of hot tea in front of her. "Tell me what happened." And Helen told her everything from beginning to end. About the surprise with the coffee, about the closet, about Mark's conversation on speakerphone, about the 5 years of deceit, the second family, the plans to sign the condo over to Jessica. Sarah listened in silence. Her face grew darker and darker. "Son of a bitch," she breathed when Helen had finished. "I always thought he was strange, cold somehow. But this? He's got some nerve." "Sarah, what do I do?" Helen looked at her friend pleadingly. "I don't know where to start." "You start with a lawyer," Sarah said decisively. "Today, I know a guy, a good one who specializes in family law. I'll call him right now and see if he can see you." She took out her phone, dialed a number, and walked over to the window. Helen sat at the table, clutching the cup, staring into space. Her life was falling apart, but strangely, she felt not only pain but also a kind of relief. Now she knew the truth. Now she could act. Not live in an illusion, not deceive herself, but act. "It's set," Sarah said, returning. "He can see you today at 6 p.m. I'll text you the address. Andrew Petrocelli. He's an experienced guy. He'll help you sort this out." "Thank you, Sarah. I don't know what I'd do without you." "Don't thank me. You'd do the same for me. Listen, are you going home tonight?" Helen thought for a moment. "I will, but I won't say anything to him until I've consulted with the lawyer. I need to do everything right, so he doesn't have time to transfer anything or hide the money. Smart girl. Act calm, as if you don't know anything. Otherwise, he'll sense something and start acting faster." They sat for another hour and a half, talking, discussing the details. Sarah explained that she would need to gather all financial documents, bank statements, and income statements. The more evidence, the better. Helen listened, took notes, nodded. Her mind worked clearly, coldly. Emotions had taken a back seat. At 5:00, she left her friend's house and drove to her meeting with the lawyer. The office was in an old building downtown, on the 4th floor. Helen walked up the stairs, found the right door, and went in. A young woman sat in the reception area. "Good evening. I'm here to see Andrew Petrocelli, Helen Peterson. Please, come in. He's expecting you." Andrew Petrocelli turned out to be a man in his 50s, with gray hair and sharp, perceptive eyes. He stood up from his desk, shook her hand, and offered her a seat. "Hello, Helen." Sarah briefly explained the situation to me. "Let's go over it in more detail. Tell me everything from the beginning, without leaving out any details." Helen recounted the whole story again. Andrew listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions and taking notes in a legal pad. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and looked at her thoughtfully. "You have a recording of the conversation?" "Yes." Helen took out her phone and played the file. The lawyer listened, then nodded. "Good. That's strong evidence. Now, the documents. You said you took the deed to the condo." "Yes, here it is." Helen took the papers out of her purse and placed them on the desk. Andrew studied them carefully, turning the pages. "The condo is in both your names. That's good. It means that in a divorce, it will be divided equally by law, but if he's trying to transfer it to a third party, that's fraud. We can contest any such actions." "And the loans?" Helen asked. "I'm a co-signer on most of them. We'll need to look at the contracts. If he's the borrower and you're the co-signer, the primary responsibility is on him. But if he doesn't pay, the bank can come after you. We will try to prove that the loans were taken out with fraudulent intent, that the funds were not used for family needs. So, I might not have to pay these loans? I can't promise a 100% result, but there's a good chance, especially given the recording of his conversation where he admits to using you. That's serious evidence. Now, the question is, what do you want to get out of this? Helen paused, gathering her thoughts. I want a divorce. I want to keep the condo, or at least my share of it. I want him to be responsible for his own debts, and I don't want him to get a single penny of what I've earned. Andrew smiled. Those are reasonable demands. We'll get to work. Tomorrow, I'll prepare the divorce petition and the motion for division of assets. We'll also file for an injunction to freeze the asset, the condo, so he can't do anything with it before the court's decision. You'll need to gather all the financial documents you have at home. Statements, receipts, pay stubs, anything that proves your financial contributions to the family. Okay, I'll gather everything. And one more thing. Don't say anything to your husband yet. Act as you normally would. We need time to prepare so he doesn't start hiding money or transferring assets. I understand. They talked for another 40 minutes, discussing details, timelines, and fees. Helen signed the retainer agreement and paid the initial fee. Leaving the office, she felt a strange sense of calm. Yes, her life was falling apart, but she wasn't standing still, crying, or feeling sorry for herself. She was taking action. Helen left the lawyer's office as it was getting dark outside. The streetlights had come on, illuminating the wet asphalt after the rain. She got in her car and checked the time. 8 p.m. Mark was probably already home, waiting for dinner, as usual. Before, she would have rushed, worried about being late. Now, she didn't care. She started the engine and drove home slowly, unhurriedly. On the way, she thought about how she would act, calm, natural, as if nothing had happened. It would be difficult, but she would manage it. For herself, for her future. The apartment greeted her with light from the windows and a familiar smell. Helen opened the door with her key and stepped into the hallway. Mark was in the living room, sitting on the couch, watching TV. He turned around when he heard her. "Oh, you're here. Where have you been?" "I was starting to worry." "I was at Sarah's," Helen replied, taking off her shoes. Her voice was even, calm. "We haven't seen each other in a while. Decided to catch up. Is dinner going to be ready soon?" "I'm starving." Before, those words, said in that tone, would have only made her want to feed her husband as quickly as possible. Now, a spark of irritation flared inside her. He hadn't even asked how she was, hadn't shown any interest in what she'd been doing. "Just is dinner ready?" "I'll make something now," she said, and went into the kitchen. She cooked mechanically, taking food from the fridge, chopping vegetables, putting a pan on the stove. Her hands moved on their own. Her thoughts were far away. She remembered Mark's words from that conversation. Foolish, naive, old hag. That's what he thought of her. That's what she meant to him. A tool. A source of money. Half an hour later, dinner was ready. Helen set the table and called her husband. He came, sat down, and began to eat in silence. She sat across from him, looking at him. The same ordinary face she had known for so many years. Graying temples, wrinkles around his eyes, the familiar scar on his chin from a bicycle fall in his youth. How could she have not seen the deceit hiding behind that face? "This is good," Mark grunted, chewing. "As always. Thanks." Meeting with partners. A business trip, of course. To his second family, to Jessica and Mikey. "I see," Helen nodded. "When are you leaving?" "Monday morning. I'll be back Friday evening." They finished their meal in silence. Mark stood up, took his plate to the sink, and went back to the living room and the TV. Helen stayed in the kitchen, washing dishes, wiping the table, putting things away. Then, she went to the bedroom, closed the door, sat on the bed, and took out her phone. She texted Sarah. "Thanks for everything. Met with the lawyer. We're starting the process. Everything's okay at home. I'm holding it together." The reply came a minute later. "You got this. I'm here for you. Call anytime if you need anything." Helen lay down on the bed and closed her eyes. Sleep wouldn't come. Thoughts spun in her head, giving her no peace. She recalled different moments from their life together, trying to find the signs she had missed. They must have been there. The calls he didn't take in front of her, the texts he'd read and quickly delete, the times he came home late from work, explaining it away as negotiations. She had believed every word, never asked too many questions, trusted him. The next morning, Mark left for work early, as usual. Helen got up, got ready, and drove to the hospital. Work was a good distraction. Patients, injections, IV drips, paperwork, it all went on as usual. But inside, there was a constant tension, an anticipation. She knew that soon, everything would change. Soon, Mark would find out that she knew, and then the real war would begin. 2 days later, Andrew Petrocelli called. Helen, the documents are ready. The divorce petition has been filed. The motion to freeze the condo has been filed as well. Your husband will be served with a summons tomorrow. Be prepared for his reaction. Okay, thank you. One more thing. The secretary, Brenda, has agreed to testify. She has provided recordings of several of your husband's conversations where he discussed his second family. This will strengthen our position. Please pass on my gratitude to her. The next day, Helen was at work when her phone rang. Mark. She glanced at the screen, took a deep breath, and answered. What the hell is this summons from the court? His voice was angry, sharp. What have you done? I filed for divorce, Helen answered calmly. It's time to end this charade, Mark. Are you out of your mind? What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that I know everything. About Jessica, about Mikey, about how you've been using me for 5 years. I know everything. Silence. A long, heavy silence. It doesn't matter. What matters is that I recorded your conversation. Every word. How you bragged about squeezing money out of me. How I was your convenient fool. How you were planning to sign the condo over to your mistress. It's all recorded. Silence again. She could hear his heavy breathing. Helen, it's not what you think. No, Mark. It's exactly what I think. My lawyer has already filed all the documents. The condo is frozen. You can't transfer it. You'll be paying for those loans yourself, and I'll get a divorce and my share of the assets. You're going to regret this. His voice became threatening. I'll find a way to leave you with nothing. Try me, Helen replied and hung up. Her hands were shaking slightly, but inside she felt a sense of certainty. She had done it. She had told him everything she thought, without screaming, without crying, without begging for an explanation. She had just stated the facts and ended the conversation. When she got home that evening, she found that Mark was gone. Some of his clothes were missing from the closet, his toothbrush from the bathroom, documents from his home office. He had moved out. Good. That made things easier. Helen walked through the apartment, feeling a strange sense of relief. His presence, his coldness, was gone. There was only her and the silence. A calm, clean silence. The next day, she met with Andrew Petrocelli again. He informed her that Mark had hired his own lawyer and filed a counterclaim, demanding half of the condo and trying to prove that some of the loans were for mutual expenses. He's going to fight, the lawyer warned. But we have a strong position. The recording, the secretary's testimony, the bank statements you've collected. It all proves he was leading a double life at your expense. How long will the court case take? 3 to 4 months, maybe longer if he tries to delay. But we will win. Helen nodded. 3 to 4 months. She could endure it. A week went by. Mark tried calling several times, sent texts. At first, he threatened. Then he tried to persuade her, promised to explain everything, asked to meet. Helen didn't answer. Once, he came to her building, waiting for her by the entrance. She came out, he rushed towards her. Helen, let's just talk, like adults. We have nothing to talk about, she said, walking past him. It will all be decided in court. You're ruining my life. I have a family, a child. She stopped, turned to him, and looked him straight in the eye. You had a family here, with me, for 25 years. And you chose to destroy it yourself. Now live with the consequences. She walked away without looking back. Mark was left standing by the entrance, helpless and lost. Sarah supported her every day. They met for coffee, talked. Her friend helped her gather documents, checked all the paperwork, and calmed her down when Helen began to doubt her actions. "You're doing the right thing," Sarah would say. "He doesn't deserve your forgiveness. He doesn't deserve you." Brenda also kept in touch, texting to ask how she was doing and offering help. Helen was grateful to her. Without that woman, she could have lived in deceit for years longer. The days and weeks passed. The court date was set for the end of the month. Helen prepared, rehearsing in her mind what she would say, how she would carry herself. Andrew assured her that everything would be fine, that the evidence was on their side. And then the day of the first hearing arrived. Helen came to the courthouse in a conservative dark suit, holding a folder of documents. Mark was already sitting in the hallway with his lawyer, a man in his 40s with a self-assured look. When he saw her, Mark turned away. The hearing lasted about an hour. The judge listened to both sides, examined the documents, and listened to the recording. Her face remained impassive, but Helen noticed her frown as she listened to Mark's words about how he had used his wife. "The hearing is adjourned for 2 weeks," the judge announced. "During this time, we will conduct a forensic analysis of the bank transactions and summon witnesses. The next hearing is on the 12th. They left the courtroom. Mark tried to approach her, but his lawyer stopped him. Helen walked past without a glance. "It's going well," Andrew said as they went down to the first floor. "The judge is clearly on your side. The recording made an impression. What's next?" "We wait for the analysis. It will show where the money was going and confirm your statements about your husband supporting a second family. That will completely demolish his position." Helen nodded and left the courthouse. The sun was shining brightly, and a warm breeze was blowing. She took out her phone and texted Sarah. "First hearing went well. Judge is on my side." The reply came instantly. "I knew it. Hang in there, friend. It'll be over soon." Helen put her phone away and walked to her car. Yes, it would be over soon, and she would be free. Free from the lies, the betrayal, the man who considered her a convenient fool. She would start a new life, a life where she was valued, where she didn't have to work herself to the bone for someone else to enjoy the fruits of her labor. There was still a court case ahead, more challenges, but the worst was behind her. She had learned the truth, accepted it, and started to act. And that was already a victory. The 2 weeks until the next hearing dragged on slowly. Helen went to work, came home to an empty apartment, cooked dinner for one, and watched TV. Life went on, but inside she felt a constant tension, an anticipation. Every day, she checked her email, called her lawyer, and asked about the progress of the financial analysis. Finally, Andrew Petroselli called. "Helen, the analysis is complete. The results are in our favor. Over the last 5 years, about $150,000 was transferred from your husband's accounts to an account belonging to a one Jessica Monroe. Regular payments, every month. This is clear evidence of him supporting a second family with marital funds. $150,000. Helen repeated, feeling anger burn inside her. "Yes. Plus, we found email correspondence between your husband and Miss Monroe on his work email. He discussed buying a condo in her name with her and planned the transfer of your property. All of this will be presented in court." "How did you get his emails?" "His secretary provided access to his work email. It's legal, as it's a corporate email account, and she had administrative rights." Helen smiled. Brenda had helped again. "Thank you. So, at the next hearing, we'll present all of this." "Yes. I'm confident the judge will rule in your favor. Your husband won't be able to contest any of it." The second hearing began promptly at 10 a.m. Helen again came in a conservative suit, composed and calm. Mark sat in his place, pale, with dark circles under his eyes. He clearly hadn't been sleeping well lately. The judge announced the results of the analysis. Mark's lawyer tried to object, saying something about the money being transferred for personal reasons, that it didn't prove infidelity, but the judge cut him off. "The correspondence between your client and Miss Monroe clearly indicates a long-term romantic relationship and plans for a life together. The messages mention their shared child. These are not personal reasons. This is the fact of leading a parallel family life at the expense of his legal wife. Then Brenda was called to the stand. The secretary entered the courtroom, sat in the witness box. She was pale but held herself with confidence. The judge asked her a few questions. Brenda confirmed that she had repeatedly heard Mark's conversations about his second family, that he openly discussed his plans to use his wife and transfer their property. Mark sat with his head bowed. His lawyer whispered something in his ear, but he didn't react. "Does the respondent have anything to say in his defense?" the judge asked. Mark raised his head and looked at Helen. His eyes held anger, resentment, but also a kind of hopelessness. "I love Jessica," he said quietly. "I wanted to be with her, but I couldn't just leave Helen. I thought I could arrange things so that no one would get hurt. Instead, you deceived your wife for 5 years, spent marital funds to support another family, and planned to deprive your legal wife of her home," the judge said sternly. The court rules as follows. The marriage between Mark Peterson and Helen Peterson is dissolved. The condominium located at shall remain the sole property of Mrs. Peterson. All debts incurred in Mr. Peterson's name are his sole responsibility. Mrs. Peterson is released from her obligations as a cosigner due to the proven fraudulent use of her signature. Mr. Peterson is ordered to pay Mrs. Peterson compensation of $25,000 for emotional distress. The court's decision is final and may be appealed within 30 days. The judge banged the gavel. It was over. Helen sat, not believing what had just happened. She had won. The condo was hers. The loans were no longer her problem. And there was compensation. She had won. Andrew Petrocelli placed a hand on her shoulder. "Congratulations, you're free." She turned to him, and only then did she feel the tears streaming down her cheeks. Tears of relief, of joy, of liberation. "Thank you for everything." "You're welcome. You did this yourself. I just helped with the legal paperwork." They left the courtroom. Mark was standing in the hallway with his lawyer. Seeing Helen, he took a step towards her. "Helen, wait. We have nothing more to talk about," she said firmly. "You have Jessica and Mikey. Go live with them. I'm going to start living for myself." She walked past him without looking back. Mark was left standing in the hallway, looking lost and defeated. Sarah was waiting for her outside. Her friend hugged her tightly. "So, did you win?" "Yes, everything's mine. The condo, my freedom, my future. I'm so happy for you. Let's go celebrate. I bought champagne." They got into Sarah's car and drove to her place. On the way, Helen looked out the window at the city passing by. Spring was in full bloom. The trees were green. People were walking in light clothing, smiling. The world went on, and now she was a part of that world again. A whole, free part. At Sarah's, they opened the bottle and poured it into glasses. "To your freedom," Sarah toasted. "To the fact that you found the strength not to break, but to fight back. To freedom." Helen repeated and took a sip. They talked, laughed, and reminisced about how it all began. That day in the office, the closet, the recorded conversation. Helen talked about how scary it was to stand in the dark and listen to her whole life fall apart. But now, months later, she understood that that day was not the end, but the beginning. The beginning of a new life. "What are you going to do now?" Sarah asked. "I don't know for sure. Maybe I'll quit my second job, finally start living a normal life. Go on vacation somewhere. I've always dreamed of seeing the ocean. Maybe I'll sign up for some classes, learn something new." That's the spirit. Live for yourself. You've spent so many years living for someone else. Helen nodded. Yes, she had lived for Mark. Worked, saved, endured. Now, everything would change. A few days passed. Helen submitted her resignation from her second job. She kept only her position at the hospital, where she liked it, where she had good colleagues. Her salary was enough to live on, especially now that she didn't have to pay off loans. She began to tidy up the condo, throwing out the things Mark hadn't taken. His old shirts, ties, books he never read. She rearranged the furniture in the living room, bought new curtains, light and airy. The condo was transformed. It became different. Now it was her home. Only hers. Brenda called a week after the court date. "Mrs. Peterson, how are you? how are things? I'm well, Brenda. Thank you so much for everything. Without you, I would have never known the truth. I'm glad I could help. Listen, I wanted to tell you, I quit. I can't work at that company anymore, knowing he's walking around there like nothing happened. Did you find another job? Yes. I've already started at another firm. The pay is even better. And I was wondering, maybe we could meet up for coffee sometime? Helen smiled. Absolutely. How about tomorrow? The next day, they met at the same coffee shop where Helen had bought the cappuccinos on that fateful day. They sat by the window, ordered coffee and pastries. How are you feeling? Brenda asked. Honestly, free. For the first time in many years, truly free. Yes, it was painful. Betrayal is always painful, but now I realize it was for the best. I could have lived with him for another 10 years, never knowing. You're very strong. Not at first. At first, I thought I couldn't handle it, that I wouldn't make it. But then I realized I had no other choice. Either break and feel sorry for myself, or act and take my life into my own hands. They talked for over an hour. Brenda shared that she had felt guilty all those years, knowing the truth and staying silent. Helen reassured her, saying she held no grudges, that everything had worked out as it should have. A month passed. Mark did not file an appeal. The court's decision came into effect. Helen received the divorce papers, the new deed showing the condo was solely her property. The bank sent a letter confirming the release of her obligations as a co-signer on the loans. She sat on the couch in her condo, holding these papers, and smiled. It was finally over. Sarah helped her plan a vacation. They chose Florida, a small town on the coast, 2 weeks by the sea, away from the city bustle. Helen bought tickets, booked a hotel, and packed her suitcase. On the day of her departure, as she was leaving her apartment, she paused at the doorway and looked back. A bright, clean condo. Her life. Her future. She locked the door and walked towards that future. Florida was warm and sunny. The ocean roared, waves crashing onto the shore. Helen walked barefoot on the beach, feeling the warm sand under her feet. She read books she had long put off. She swam, sunbathed, ate fresh fruit, and simply lived. One evening, sitting on the porch with a glass of wine, she took out her phone and texted Sarah. You know, I thought divorce and betrayal were the end, but it turns out they were the beginning of a life where I finally value myself. The reply came almost immediately. I always knew you'd make it through. You're stronger than you think. Helen put her phone away and watched the sunset. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful. The world was beautiful, and she could finally see it. Returning from her vacation, she felt renewed, tanned, rested, full of energy. Her colleagues at work noticed the change. Helen, you look so good, they said. What happened? Life happened, she would smile. 6 months after the divorce, Helen signed up for a painting class. She had always dreamed of learning to paint, but never found the time. Now, she had time. In the evenings, she went to the studio, learning to work with paints, charcoal, and pencils. It brought her pleasure, calmed her, and gave her a way to express what had been bottled up inside. She met new people in her classes. Men and women of different ages, with different stories. They painted, discussed art, and drank tea during breaks. No one asked about her personal life or offered unsolicited advice. They just created together. One day after class, a man in his 50s, tall, gray-haired, with kind eyes, approached her. Excuse me, I noticed your work. You have a very interesting style. There's a sense of liberation to it, as if you've shed a great weight. Helen laughed. You guessed it. That's exactly what I did. My name is Igor, he said, extending a hand. Helen. She shook it. They started talking. Igor told her he was a retired architect. He had decided to pursue what he had always put off, art. Helen shared that she too had only recently started living for herself. They began to chat after class, sometimes going to a cafe, discussing art, life, dreams. No obligations, no pressure. Just two people who found an interesting conversationalist in each other. A year passed. Helen celebrated her birthday with Sarah, Brenda, and a few colleagues from the hospital. They gathered at her place, set the table, sang, and laughed. "You know, Helen," Sarah said when the guests had left and the two of them were cleaning up, "I'm so proud of you. A year ago, you were crushed, broken, and look at you now. Are you happy?" Helen paused, thinking, "Yes, I am happy. And you know what's strangest? I'm grateful for that day in the closet. If it weren't for Brenda, if I hadn't heard that conversation, I would still be living a lie. And now, I'm truly living." She went to the window and looked out at the city at night. Lights in the windows, cars on the roads, a life that goes on. And she was a part of that life. Free, independent, happy. She never saw Mark again. She heard from mutual acquaintances that he had married Jessica but hadn't found much happiness. The debts were crushing him. He was paying the compensation in installments and working himself to the bone. Helen felt neither anger nor pity for him, only indifference. He had made his choice, and now he was living with the consequences. And she had made her choice. The choice to live. To love herself. To cherish each day. And that choice was the right one. Standing by the window in her apartment with a cup of tea in her hands, Helen smiled. Life went on, and she was ready for it, for new encounters, new discoveries, new opportunities. She was ready to be happy, because she deserved that happiness. She finally understood that. Thank you for listening to the story. This has been the Crossroads of Fate channel. We apologize for any errors. Please write in the co.